elderly woman in a wheelchair was rejected by her 9 children, but a stranger changed her fate. Mrs. Margaret held the phone with trembling hands as she listened to the 9th and final refusal. Her youngest son, Richard, repeated the same words as his 8 siblings. "Mom, you know I can't take you in here. My wife won't allow it, and with the little kids, it's just too hard," he said on the other end of the line, not a hint of remorse in his voice. "But my son, I have nowhere else to go. The nursing home kicked me out yesterday because I couldn't pay the overdue fees," she whispered, feeling the weight of her 78 years on her hunched shoulders. "Figure it out yourself. We've all made it clear we don't want this burden." The click of the phone echoed like a gunshot in the old woman's chest. There she was, on a cold January morning in Asheville, sitting in her worn-out wheelchair in front of the old nursing home that had been her home for the last 3 years. Her few belongings were in a plastic bag hanging from the armrest, and on the other arm, she carried a yellowed folder with 9 letters, one from each child, all saying the same thing. She wasn't welcome. The street was empty that Monday morning. The old houses of Asheville seemed to judge her with their closed windows, as if whispering about the abandoned woman with nowhere to go. Margaret looked up at the cloudy sky and wondered where she had gone so wrong in raising her children. The cold mountain wind cut through her thin coat. She tried to push the wheelchair herself, but her strength wasn't what it used to be. The arthritis in her hands made every movement difficult, and the weight of abandonment hurt more than any physical pain. Then she heard footsteps approaching. A young woman around 25 with brown hair tied in a ponytail and wearing a floral apron walked down the sidewalk carrying a bucket of flowers. "Are you okay?" the girl asked, noticing Margaret's downcast expression. "I'm fine, dear," the old woman lied, trying to hide the tears welling up. The young woman's name was Emily Johnson, and she worked at a small flower shop 3 blocks away. She stopped and looked more closely at Margaret. There was something about the scene that touched her deeply. A woman with snow-white hair, alone in a wheelchair, with a bag of belongings that could fit in one hand. "Are you sure? I can get you some water or something," Emily insisted, stepping closer. Margaret was about to say she was fine when a sudden dizziness hit her. The stress of the last few days, the lack of a proper meal, and the despair of having nowhere to go made her lose consciousness and faint in the chair. Emily rushed to help, leaving the flowers on the ground. She managed to wake Margaret with gentle taps on her cheeks and offered water from a bottle she carried. "Come on, I'm taking you to my shop. You need a place to rest," Emily said, not waiting for an answer. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. On the way to the flower shop, Margaret tried to protest that she didn't want to be a bother, but Emily wouldn't listen. The young woman carefully pushed the wheelchair over the uneven cobblestone streets, avoiding potholes and loose rocks. Hope Flower Shop was a small but cozy space, with colorful arrangements scattered everywhere. The sweet scent of flowers mixed with the smell of damp soil, creating an atmosphere of peace. Emily helped Margaret settle into a corner near the counter. "Were you waiting for someone out there on the street?" Emily asked, preparing a cup of hot tea. "No, dear. I have nowhere to go," confessed Margaret, and the tears she had held back all morning finally streamed down her wrinkled face. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. She had lost her own grandmother 2 years ago and had since missed having an elderly maternal figure in her life. Seeing Margaret in that state awakened a protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. "What happened? Would you like to talk about it?" Emily asked, offering tea and sitting in a chair beside her. Margaret hesitated for a moment. She was ashamed to tell the truth, but the genuine kindness of this young stranger made her open her heart. She spoke of her 9 children, how they had all rejected her, the eviction from the nursing home, and the letters she carried in her yellowed folder. Emily was shocked. She couldn't understand how children could abandon their own mother like that. She asked to see the letters, and Margaret, with trembling hands, opened the folder and showed her the 9 documents. Each letter was colder than the last. William, the eldest son, had written, "Mother, you've done your part in life. Now you must understand, we have our own families to care for." Deborah, the second daughter, said, I can't take you in because my husband won't allow it. And so it went. All 9 children had found excuses not to shelter the mother who raised them. This is outrageous, Emily murmured as she read the letters. How could they do this to their own mother? I raised them all by myself, you know, Margaret said, drying her eyes with a tissue Emily handed her. Their father left when Richard, the youngest, was just 2. I worked as a maid, a seamstress, a saleswoman, anything to give them the best. Emily felt anger rising inside her. She looked at Margaret and saw both fragility and dignity in this woman who had dedicated her whole life to ungrateful children. A decision formed in her mind. You'll stay with me tonight, Emily said firmly. Tomorrow we'll figure out a better solution. I can't accept that, dear. You've already done too much, Margaret protested. It's not a favor, it's the right thing to do. My grandmother always said we should treat the elderly the way we'd want our own grandparents to be treated. That afternoon, Emily closed Hope Flower Shop early and took Margaret to her small 2-room apartment in downtown Asheville. The apartment was simple but clean and tidy. Emily insisted on giving Margaret her own bed while she made do with an improvised mattress in the living room. Over a dinner of vegetable soup that Emily prepared, the two talked at length. Margaret shared stories of her youth, how she had married John at 18, a man who promised to care for her forever, but ran off with another woman when life got hard with so many young children. I could never understand how he could abandon 9 children, Margaret said, stirring her soup slowly, but I swore I thought at least my children would be different. Emily listened carefully to every word. There was something in Margaret's story that touched her deeply, though she couldn't quite place it. The next morning, Emily woke up determined to find a solution for Margaret. She dialed the first number she found in the letters, Williams, the eldest son. "Hello, who is this?" answered an impatient male voice. "Good morning, my name is Emily Johnson. I'm calling about your mother, Mrs. Margaret. Look, miss, if this is some nursing home trying to bill me, I'm not paying. I already said I won't take responsibility for her," William interrupted. "No, sir, that's not it. Your mother is with me. She has nowhere to go and what does that have to do with me? She can figure it out herself. I'm hanging up, I don't have time for this." But Emily refused to give up. She managed to get William's address from the phone book and decided to go to his house in person. Mrs. Margaret tried to dissuade her, but Emily was determined. William's house was in the most upscale neighborhood of Asheville, a grand mansion with well-kept gardens and 2 imported cars in the garage. Emily rang the doorbell several times until an elegant blonde woman answered. "What do you want?" the woman asked with an unfriendly expression. "I'd like to speak with William about his mother, Mrs. Margaret." The woman sighed in irritation. "William, there's someone here talking about your mother," she called into the house. William appeared at the door, a middle-aged man, well-dressed, with the look of someone who had never faced hardship in his life. When he saw Emily, his expression hardened. "I already said on the phone that I won't take responsibility for her. My mother made poor choices in life, and now she has to face the consequences." "What poor choices?" Emily asked, curious. William glanced at his wife, who shrugged as if to say, "Go ahead and tell her." 5 years ago, my mother gave away the house she lived in to some neighbor who was having problems. The house was worth a good amount, but she decided to be charitable. After that, she had nowhere to live, and we had to put her in a nursing home. "And you didn't help with the fees?" Emily asked, indignant. "Listen, miss, we all have our own lives. We can't keep paying for her mistakes forever. If she had thought better before giving away the house, she wouldn't be in this situation," William's wife chimed in. "Exactly, and now she expects us to give up our comfort to take care of someone who never listened to anyone." Emily left furious. How could they be so cold and calculating? On her way back, she reflected on the revelation. Mrs. Margaret had given away her home to help someone in need, and her children had abandoned her for it. When she got home, she found Mrs. Margaret crying softly in the living room. The elderly woman had tried calling her other children that morning, and they had all been equally cruel and direct in their refusal. "Emily, my dear, I think there's no hope left for me. Maybe it's better if I look for shelter on the streets," Mrs. Margaret said, her voice trembling. "Don't say that, Mrs. Margaret. You are worth so much. Your children just can't see it." That afternoon, Emily made a decision that would completely change their lives. She told Mrs. Margaret that she would take care of her for as long as needed. I can't leave you alone. I'll adjust my apartment and we'll make it work. But my dear, you're young. You have your own life to live. You shouldn't sacrifice yourself for me. It's not a sacrifice, Mrs. Margaret. It's the right thing to do. My grandmother always said that when we help someone with our heart, life repays us in some way. Over the following days, Emily rearranged her routine to include caring for Mrs. Margaret. She took the elderly woman to Hope Flower Shop during the day, where Mrs. Margaret helped arrange flowers and chatted with customers. Her presence brought a special charm to the place, and many customers began visiting just to talk with her. Mrs. Margaret, in turn, felt useful again. She shared stories from her youth, gave advice on plant care, and slowly regained the vitality she had lost after being abandoned by her children. It was on one of these afternoons that something unexpected happened. Richard, Mrs. Margaret's youngest son, showed up at the flower shop. Emily was helping a customer when she saw a man around 45 enter and look straight at Mrs. Margaret. "Mom," he said, his voice a mix of anger and discomfort. Mrs. Margaret looked up, and for a moment her heart leaped with hope. "Richard, my son! Have you changed your mind?" "I'm not here for that, Mom. I came because I heard you've been spreading our private talk to strangers," he said, looking at Emily with contempt. "What do you mean, spreading?" "This girl here went looking for William, telling everyone about our business. This has to stop." Emily stepped closer, sensing the tension in the air. "I only tried to help. I don't understand how you could abandon your own mother." "You don't understand anything," Richard shot back. "My mother has always been stubborn and never listened to anyone. She's the one who created this mess." "What mess?" Emily asked, realizing there was more to the story. Richard hesitated, but anger took over. "The mess of giving her house to a stranger and then expecting us to deal with the consequences. On top of that, she's still holding on to some old documents that could cause problems for all of us." "What documents?" Emily pressed. Mrs. Margaret quickly intervened. "They're not important, Richard. Just old papers with no value." "Mum, you know very well that's not true," Richard said, lowering his voice. "I brought some papers for you to sign. It's for everyone's good." He pulled a brown envelope from his pocket and placed it on the flower shop counter. "What are these papers?" Mrs. Margaret asked nervously. "Just documents releasing us, your children, from any legal responsibility for you. That way, you're free to do as you please, and so are we." Emily glanced at the papers and sensed something was off. Why was Richard so eager for his mother to sign them? "Mrs. Margaret, you don't have to sign anything right now. Let's read everything carefully first," Emily suggested. "This girl has no business here," Richard snapped. "It's a family matter." "If it's a family matter, why did you abandon her?" Emily countered bravely. Richard glared at her, but something in his eyes betrayed that he was hiding something important. "Mom, I'll leave the papers here. You have a week to sign. After that, things could get complicated for all of us." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. After Richard left, Mrs. Margaret was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled as she stared at the brown envelope on the counter. "Mrs. Margaret, what are these documents your son mentioned?" Emily asked, sitting beside the elderly woman. "Just old papers, dear, about the land where they all live now." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Margaret took a deep breath before answering. "When I was young, my late husband bought a large plot in downtown Asheville. Over time, we built 9 small houses on it, one for each child when they grew up and married." Emily listened intently. "After John passed, I took charge of everything. Over the years, all the children married and built their lives in those houses. But the property deeds always stayed in my name. And now? Now they want me to transfer the properties to them permanently, for free. But a few years ago, a lawyer approached me saying the land is worth a lot because it's in an area that's going to appreciate." Emily felt a chill. The situation was becoming clearer. The children didn't just want to avoid responsibility for their mother. They wanted to make sure she had no claim to the properties. "Do you still have the original documents?" "Yes, they're kept in a safe place, but I never thought my own children would be capable of..." Mrs. Margaret couldn't finish the sentence. That night, Emily struggled to sleep. She searched online about property value increases in Asheville and discovered that there were indeed urban revitalization projects planned for the city's downtown area. Land that was once worth very little was now being sought after by companies interested in commercial developments. The next morning, Emily suggested they consult a lawyer to better understand Mrs. Margaret's legal situation. The elderly woman initially resisted, saying she didn't want trouble with her children, but Emily managed to convince her that it was important to know her rights. The lawyer they consulted, Mr. Benjamin Miller, confirmed Emily's suspicions. The land where her 9 children lived was located in an area with high appreciation potential, and since Mrs. Margaret was still the legal owner, she held significant rights over any future negotiations. Mrs. Margaret, these documents your children want you to sign essentially transfer all rights to them without any compensation, the lawyer explained. You would lose any claim to properties worth millions today. Millions? Mrs. Margaret asked, disbelieving. Yes, ma'am. This land is in an area that will see major investments in the coming years. Any future sale or development would generate a substantial sum. Emily was shocked. Mrs. Margaret's children hadn't just abandoned her, they were trying to take away the only financial security she had left. What do you recommend, Doctor? Emily asked. I recommend Mrs. Margaret doesn't sign anything until we have a full understanding of the situation, and I suggest we make copies of all original documents for safekeeping. On the way back, Mrs. Margaret was deep in thought. Emily, I never imagined my children could do something like this. I always thought they were just upset with me for donating my house. Mrs. Margaret, people do terrible things when money is involved, but you're not alone now. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Deborah, Mrs. Margaret's second daughter, showed up at the Hope Flower Shop. She was an elegant, well-dressed woman, but her expression was cold. Mum, I need to talk to you, she said, completely ignoring Emily. Of course, my dear. Sit here. I heard you went to a lawyer yesterday. That wasn't a good idea. Emily realized they were somehow keeping tabs on Mrs. Margaret. How do you know where Mrs. Margaret has been? Emily asked. That's none of your business, Deborah replied sharply. Mom, I came to make an offer. If you sign the papers Richard brought, we'll guarantee you a spot in one of the best nursing homes in the city, with all expenses paid. For how long? Emily asked skeptically. As long as needed, Deborah answered, but her tone wasn't convincing. Mrs. Margaret looked at her daughter with sadness. Deborah, this isn't about nursing homes or money, it's about family. You're my children. I just wanted to be welcomed into your homes. Mom, you need to understand our lives have changed. We have responsibilities, commitments, we can't turn back time. But when you were little and needed me, I never said it wasn't possible, Mrs. Margaret countered, her voice breaking. Deborah was visibly uncomfortable with the remark. That's different, Mom. You were our mother. It was your duty to care for us. And aren't you my children? Don't you have a duty to care for me now that I need you? The question hung in the air, and Deborah had no answer. She stood abruptly. Mom, you have 5 days to make a decision. After that, we can't guarantee the nursing home offer. After Deborah left, Mrs. Margaret broke down in tears. Emily comforted her, but inside, she was boiling with anger. How could they blackmail their own mother like this? In the following days, other children began showing up at the flower shop, always with the same demand, to pressure Margaret into signing the documents. Each visit left the elderly woman more shaken and confused. That's when Emily had an idea. She started secretly recording the children's conversations with Margaret using her phone. Emily wanted to document the psychological pressure they were putting on their elderly mother. During one of these recordings, she captured a revealing conversation between Robert, the third child, and his wife, who had come with him. If the old lady doesn't sign those papers soon, we'll have to resort to other methods, Robert said to his wife, thinking no one was listening. What other methods? The woman asked. We can question her mental capacity. A 78-year-old woman in a wheelchair, abandoned. It wouldn't be hard to get a guardianship order. Emily froze when she heard that. They were willing to declare Margaret mentally incompetent to get what they wanted. That night, Emily played the recordings for Margaret. The elderly woman was devastated to learn how far her children were willing to go. "Emily, I don't think I have the strength to fight this anymore. Maybe I should just sign the papers and end this suffering." "No, Mrs. Margaret. You can't give up now. They have no right to treat you like this." "But they're my children, Emily. How can I take my own children to court? Because you deserve respect and dignity, and because others need to see it's possible to fight injustice, even when it comes from your own family." The next morning, Emily woke with a strange feeling. There was something about Margaret's story that affected her deeply, and she couldn't figure out why. She decided to do some research on the elderly woman's past. She went to the town records office and requested information about the Johnson family, her own last name. What she found left her in shock. In the old records, she discovered a note about Mary Johnson, her own grandmother, who had been helped by a family in the 1960s. The family that had taken in her pregnant and helpless grandmother had the last name Jenkins, Margaret's maiden name. Emily rushed back home, her heart pounding. When she arrived, she found Margaret organizing some old photographs. "Mrs. Margaret, do you remember helping a pregnant young woman in the 60s, a woman named Mary Johnson?" Margaret looked up from the photos in surprise. "Mary Johnson? Yes, I do remember. She was just a girl, pregnant and with no family." "Why do you ask?" "Because that Mary Johnson was my grandmother." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Margaret looked at Emily with teary eyes. "Your grandmother? The young Mary I helped deliver a baby right here in my home?" "Yes, Mrs. Margaret. My grandmother always told me about a kind-hearted woman who took her in when she had nowhere to go. A woman who welcomed her, helped with the birth, and cared for her and the baby until they could get back on their feet." Margaret began to cry. "My God, what an incredible coincidence. Your grandmother was such a sweet girl, and the baby was my father. He was born right here in your home." The two embraced tightly, overwhelmed by the discovery. Emily now understood why she had felt such a strong connection to Margaret from the very beginning. "Grandma always said life would one day give us the chance to repay the kindness we received," Emily said, still emotional. "And she was right, my dear. You came into my life when I needed it most, just like your grandmother came into mine when she needed help." This discovery only strengthened Emily's determination to help Margaret. Now, it wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about honoring her grandmother's memory and repaying the kindness her family had received decades ago. The next day, William, Mrs. Margaret's eldest son, showed up at the flower shop accompanied by two brothers. The tension was palpable the moment they walked in. "Mom, we're here to settle this once and for all," William said in an authoritative tone. "Settle what?" asked Emily, stepping protectively beside Mrs. Margaret. "First, we want to know who you are and why you're meddling in our family matters," said Robert, the middle brother, looking Emily up and down. "I'm someone who cares about Mrs. Margaret, something you haven't done in a long time." "Watch your mouth, girl," threatened the third brother, Thomas. "You don't know our family. I know enough to realize you abandoned your own mother." William turned directly to Mrs. Margaret. "Mom, this nonsense about lawyers and refusing to sign the papers has to stop. You're being influenced by this stranger." "Stranger?" Emily reacted. "I'm the only one who genuinely cares about her." "You must want something," Robert insinuated. "No one takes care of an old woman they don't know without expecting something in return." Emily felt her blood boil at the offensive remark. "You should know this old stranger helped my family decades ago. Mrs. Margaret took in my pregnant grandmother and helped deliver my father. I'm here out of gratitude and love." The three brothers were stunned by the revelation. "That changes nothing," William said coldly. "Mom, you have until tomorrow to sign the documents. Otherwise, we'll have to take legal action." "What legal action?" Mrs. Margaret asked fearfully. "We'll file for guardianship due to mental incompetence. A 78-year-old woman in a wheelchair making irrational financial decisions clearly isn't in her right mind." Emily exploded. "You're disgusting. How can you threaten your own mother like this?" "It's not a threat. It's protection," Thomas said. "Our mother needs to be protected from ill-intentioned people like you." "Ill-intentioned? I'm the only one taking care of her. Where were you when she got evicted from the nursing home?" "That's not our problem," Robert shot back. "She brought this on herself." Mrs. Margaret, who had stayed silent during the argument, finally spoke up. "Enough, all of you," she said, her voice firm in a way that surprised everyone. Her sons stared at her, not expecting this reaction. "You want to know if I'll sign the papers? Here's my answer. I won't sign anything. And if you try to file for guardianship, go ahead, but no, I'll fight back. Mom, you don't understand the consequences. I understand perfectly, William. I understand you're willing to do anything for money, even destroy your own mother." The three brothers stormed out of the flower shop furious, making threats and promising legal action. After they left, Mrs. Margaret collapsed. All the strength she had shown vanished, and she began sobbing uncontrollably. "Emily, I can't take this anymore. My heart is weak, my blood pressure is through the roof. I think I'm going to have a heart attack." Emily panicked, seeing Mrs. Margaret's condition. She immediately called emergency medical services, and the elderly woman was rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Mrs. Margaret had suffered a severe hypertensive crisis from emotional stress. She had to be hospitalized for observation and blood pressure stabilization. During her stay, not one of her 9 children came to visit. Emily stayed by Mrs. Margaret's side every day, bringing flowers from the shop and talking to keep her spirits up. "Emily, promise me something," said Margaret one afternoon in the hospital. "Anything, Mrs. Margaret. If anything happens to me, you give these documents to Dr. Benjamin," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "They're the original deeds to the property." "Don't talk like that, Mrs. Margaret. You'll get better and we'll handle this together." "But promise me you'll take care of it if I can't," Emily promised, though deep down she hoped she wouldn't have to keep that promise. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. After 3 days in the hospital, Margaret was discharged with strict orders to avoid stress and strong emotions. Emily took her back to the apartment, where she made the space even cozier and calmer. It was around this time that Emily made an important decision. She went to see Dr. Benjamin and explained the whole situation, including the recordings she'd made of Margaret's children's conversations. "Emily, what you've documented is very serious," the lawyer said after listening to the recordings. "They're exerting psychological coercion on an elderly woman, which is a crime. What can we do?" "We can file a preventive action, requesting a protective order for Mrs. Margaret. That would stop her children from pressuring or threatening her." "What about the property deeds?" "Mrs. Margaret has every right to keep her property. In fact, considering her children have lived on the land for so many years without paying rent or contributing to maintenance, she could even demand back payments." Emily was encouraged by the legal options, but she knew Margaret was emotionally too fragile for a long, draining court battle. That night, the two talked at length about the future. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation," Margaret said, "and I've come to a conclusion." "What is it, Mrs. Margaret?" "I want nothing more to do with my children. They've shown me who they really are, and I'd rather be without them than humiliated and mistreated." "Are you sure about this?" "Yes, but I also don't want to fight in court. I'm too tired for that." Emily thought for a moment before responding. "What if there's a way to resolve this without a fight, but still make sure they stop pressuring you?" "How so?" "I'll talk to Dr. Benjamin about a proposal. Maybe we can find a solution where everyone can be at peace." The next day, Emily and the lawyer came up with a strategy. They would call all 9 children to a meeting, where they'd present the facts and evidence clearly and decisively. The meeting was set to take place at the flower shop itself, on a Sunday afternoon when the store would be closed. Emily arranged the space, setting up a large table in the center with enough chairs for everyone. One by one, the 9 children arrived. The tension in the air was palpable and everyone seemed nervous and uncomfortable. Margaret sat in her wheelchair, dressed in her best clothes, her face serene. Emily had helped her get ready especially for this moment. Dr. Benjamin began the meeting by explaining its purpose. We're here to clarify once and for all the legal and family situation regarding Mrs. Margaret. Over the past few weeks, she has been subjected to unacceptable psychological pressure from her children. Psychological pressure? William questioned. We were just trying to resolve a complicated situation. By threatening to force her into a home, Emily countered. By questioning her mental capacity, the lawyer continued. I have here recordings of conversations where you pressured Mrs. Margaret, threatening her and trying to force her to sign documents against her will. The children were visibly uncomfortable when they learned about the recordings. Besides, Dr. Benjamin continued, you abandoned your mother when she needed you most, violating the Elderly Rights Act, which considers abandoning an elderly person a crime. We didn't abandon anyone, Deborah protested. She's the one who made bad decisions. What bad decisions? Helping a neighbor in need? Emily asked. Do you think it's wrong to be kind? Margaret, who had stayed quiet until then, spoke up. May I speak now? Everyone turned to her, nervously waiting for what she'd say. You want to know what I'll do with the property documents? Then I'll tell you. The room fell completely silent. 3 days ago, I donated the entire property to a social project that cares for abandoned seniors. The bomb had dropped. All 9 children were in total shock. What? William shouted, jumping up from his chair. That's right. The property no longer belongs to me, and consequently it doesn't belong to you either. Mom, you can't have done this, Robert protested, desperate. Yes, I can. It was my property, and I could do whatever I wanted with it. Richard, the youngest son, was pale. But Mom, our homes, where will we live? That's something you'll have to work out with the new owner, which is a social institution. Maybe they'll let you keep living there if you pay fair rent. Emily was impressed by Margaret's courage and determination. The elderly woman had found a way to get back at her children's greed without a legal battle. Mom, this is insane, Deborah yelled. You really are mentally ill. I'm not ill, Deborah. I've just learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you when you need them. William tried one last plea. Mom, if you undo this donation, we promise we'll take care of you. Promise? Margaret laughed bitterly. You promised to take care of me when you were born and I held you to my breast. You promised when I worked hard to give you all an education and food. Your promises mean nothing. The meeting ended with the 9 children storming out in anger, making empty threats. None of them said goodbye to their mother or showed any remorse for what they'd done. After they left, Margaret turned to Emily with a smile. Now I'm free, my dear. Free. Free from the illusion that my children loved me. Free from emotional blackmail. Free to live the rest of my life in peace. Emily hugged Margaret tenderly. Mrs. Margaret, did you really donate the property? Yes, I did. To an institution that cares for abandoned seniors. I thought it was the most fitting fate for a place tainted by greed. In the days that followed, Emily and Margaret settled into a new routine. The flower shop kept running as usual, but now with an added purpose. Margaret began using the space to talk with other lonely seniors in the area. Word by word, Margaret's story spread through the neighborhood. Other elderly people started visiting the flower shop, not just to buy flowers, but to talk, share stories, and find companionship. Emily realized there was an opportunity to create something special. She talked to Margaret about turning part of the shop into a gathering space for seniors. What a wonderful idea, Emily, Margaret said excitedly. We can create a place where people like me feel welcome and valued. They began organizing the project. Emily rearranged some furniture in the shop, creating a cozy corner with comfortable armchairs, a small table for tea and coffee, and a little space for crafts. The project grew organically. Mrs. Dorothy, an 82-year-old woman who lived alone, began visiting the space daily. Mr. Howard, a 75-year-old widower, would come every afternoon to chat and play checkers. Mrs. Rose, 80 years old, brought her embroidery to work on in good company. Within a few weeks, the flower shop had transformed into a true community center for seniors. Emily was moved to see how Margaret had blossomed in that environment. The elderly woman who had arrived desperate and abandoned was now the heart of a warm and caring social group. It was on one of these afternoons that something unexpected happened. 3 young people showed up at the flower shop, looking for Margaret. Emily greeted them cautiously. still wary after everything that had happened with the elderly woman's children. "We'd like to speak with Mrs. Margaret, if possible," said a young man around 25. "Who are you?" Emily asked. "We're her grandchildren. I'm Jason, William's son. These are my cousins, Jennifer, Deborah's daughter, and Andrew, Robert's son." Emily called Margaret, who was surprised and emotional at the sight of her grandchildren. "Jason, Jennifer, Andrew," she said, tears in her eyes. "Grandma, we came to apologize for our parents' behavior," said Jason, visibly embarrassed. "We didn't know the whole situation until a few weeks ago," explained Jennifer. "Our parents always said you were well taken care of at the nursing home." Andrew added, "When we found out you'd been abandoned and that our parents tried to force you to sign papers, we were horrified." Margaret was too emotional to speak. Emily stepped closer and offered chairs to the three young people. "How did you find out what really happened?" Emily asked. "A neighbor told my mom about you living with a florist," Jason explained. "When my mom said you were being influenced by strangers, I decided to look into it myself." "And we uncovered the whole truth," Jennifer said, "about the abandonment, the threats, everything." Andrew added, "Grandma, we want you to know that not everyone in the family agrees with what our parents did." Margaret finally managed to speak. "My dear grandchildren, you're not to blame for what happened. I understand you have your own lives and your parents. But Grandma, we want to be part of your life again," Jason said. "If you'll let us." Emily watched the scene with emotion. It was good to see that not all of Margaret's family was driven by greed and disregard. "Of course I'll let you, my dears. You'll always be welcome here." From that day on, the three grandchildren began visiting Margaret regularly. Jason, who worked as a teacher, came on his free afternoons to talk about books and history. Jennifer, a nurse, helped Emily take care of Margaret's health. Andrew, an architecture student, proposed improving the physical layout of the community space. The grandchildren's presence brought even more joy to Margaret's life. She had lost 9 children, but gained 3 grandchildren who truly cared for her. Months passed, and the flower shop project grew beyond all expectations. Emily secured partnerships with the city to offer extra activities like dance classes, cooking workshops, and physical therapy sessions for the seniors. Margaret had become the central figure of that small community. She organized conversation groups, mediated conflicts among visitors, and offered advice based on her long life experience. It was on one of these afternoons that something surprising happened. William, Margaret's eldest son, appeared at the flower shop. He was visibly embarrassed and nervous. Emily greeted him coldly. "What do you want here?" "I wanted to talk to my mother if possible. After everything you've done, you still have the nerve to show up here. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to talk to her." Margaret, who had overheard the conversation, stepped forward. "It's all right, Emily, I'll speak with him." William knelt beside his mother's wheelchair. "Mom, I came to ask for forgiveness." "Forgiveness? I know what we did was unforgivable, abandoning you, pressuring you to sign documents threatening guardianship, but it was cruel and inhumane." Margaret watched him silently for a few moments. "And what changed, William? Why are you here now asking for forgiveness?" "My wife left me, Mom. She said she didn't want to live with a man who could abandon his own mother. And Jason stopped talking to me when he found out about everything." Emily noticed that William's regret was more about the personal consequences than true remorse for what he'd done. "William," Margaret said calmly, "I forgive you because holding on to bitterness hurts me, not you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back." "Mom, I was desperate because of the debts. I thought if I could sell the land, I could solve my financial problems." "And you thought abandoning your mother was a fair price to pay to fix your problems?" William hung his head silent. "My son, you chose money over family. Now you have to live with that choice." "Mom, I can't change the past, but I can try to be a better son from now on." "William, I already have a family now," Margaret said, looking affectionately at Emily and the seniors who frequented the space. "A family that chose me not out of interest, but out of love." William tried to insist, but Margaret stood firm in her decision. She wouldn't deny forgiveness to any of her children, but she wouldn't let them hurt her again. "You can visit your son Jason here if you'd like," she said. "But as for me, we have nothing left to discuss." William left with his head down, finally understanding that some actions have irreversible consequences. In the following months, other children tried similar approaches, but Margaret maintained the same stance: forgiveness without reconciliation. She had learned to value herself and wasn't willing to accept scraps of affection after a lifetime of dedication. The first anniversary of Margaret's arrival at the flower shop was celebrated with a big party. Emily organized a gathering with all the seniors in the group, Margaret's 3 grandchildren, and some neighbors who had grown fond of the elderly woman. "Emily, you saved my life," Margaret said during the party, "not just by taking me off the streets, but by giving me a reason to live again. Mrs. Margaret, you're the one who saved my life. You taught me that family is so much more than blood. It's choice, love, and mutual care." The party was lively when Jason approached the two with news. "Grandma, Emily, I have a surprise for you." "What surprise?" Margaret asked curiously. "I got a feature in the local paper about your project. The story will run in Sunday's edition." Emily was surprised. "What do you mean, a feature in the paper?" "I talked to a journalist friend and told her about your work here. She was interested in Grandma's story and the community project that started at the flower shop." The following Sunday, the article was prominently featured on the front page of the local section. The headline read, "Flower Shop Becomes Haven for Abandoned Seniors." The story recounted Margaret's journey and how her experience had inspired the creation of a gathering space for the elderly. The response was immediate. The phone at Hope Flower Shop wouldn't stop ringing with people interested in learning about the project, seniors wanting to join the activities, and families seeking guidance on caring for elderly relatives. A week after the article was published, Emily and Margaret received a visit from a City Hall representative. "I came here to see your work in person," said the official. "We're interested in supporting and expanding the project." "Expand? How so?" asked Emily. "The city has a program to support social initiatives. We can provide resources to enlarge the space, hire specialized professionals, and create a care network for the seniors in town." Margaret and Emily were moved by the proposal. What had started as an act of charity had turned into a true social mission. 6 months later, Hope Flower Shop had become the Margaret Johnson Community Center, a modern, well-equipped space serving over 200 seniors weekly. Emily had become the official project coordinator, and Margaret, now 79, was the center's spiritual advisor. Their story had inspired the creation of similar centers in neighboring towns. Margaret and Emily traveled regularly to give talks on elder abandonment and the importance of building support networks for seniors. During one of these talks, Margaret was asked how she had managed to overcome being abandoned by her children. "The secret," she replied, "isn't to forget the pain but to turn it into purpose. I used my suffering to help other seniors going through the same situation. That way my pain became healing for others." Emily, sitting beside her at the table, added, "And I've learned that real family isn't the one we're born into. It's the one we choose, and that chooses us every day." The audience applauded, deeply moved. In the front row, Jason, Jennifer, and Andrew watched proudly as their grandmother and the woman who had become like a daughter to her spoke. After the talk, an elderly woman from the audience approached Margaret. "Mrs. Margaret, my story is so much like yours. My children abandoned me too. How do I find the strength to start over at 75? Margaret held the woman's hands tenderly. "My dear, age is just a number. What matters is the love we still have to give and receive. It's never too late to find a new family, new friends, new purposes." "But how do I find those people?" "Start by being the person you'd like to meet. Be kind, welcoming, open to helping. Love attracts love. And when you open yourself to give, you automatically open yourself to receive." Emily watched Margaret with admiration. The elderly woman she had found abandoned on the street had become a source of wisdom and inspiration for hundreds. That night back at home, the two talked about the center's future plans. "Emily, I have a confession to make," said Margaret. "What is it, Mrs. Margaret?" "When my children abandoned me, I thought my life was over. I believed I had nothing left to offer the world. And now I know that was just the end of one chapter. Their abandonment made room for me to find my true life's purpose. What purpose? To show other seniors that they still matter, that they can still be useful and loved, and most of all, that it's never too late to start again. Emily smiled, touched. Mrs. Margaret, you know I love you like a grandmother, right? And I love you like a daughter, Emily. You taught me life's greatest lesson, that family is built with love, not blood. 2 years after their first meeting on the street, Margaret was turning 80. To celebrate, Emily threw a big party at the community center. Over 300 people attended the celebration, seniors from the center, city employees, journalists, neighbors, and dozens of people who had been inspired by Margaret's story. During the event, Margaret received a special tribute from the city. A plaque with her name would be placed at the entrance of the center, recognizing her contribution to the cause of seniors in town. Jason, Jennifer, and Andrew prepared a special surprise for their grandmother, a photo album documenting her entire transformation from her first day at the flower shop to that very moment. "Grandma, this album shows the most incredible journey we've ever known," said Jason, handing her the gift. "The journey of a woman who turned abandonment into belonging, pain into healing, loneliness into community," Jennifer added. Emily was moved seeing Margaret's happiness. The elderly woman flipped through the album with tears of joy in her eyes, seeing her own transformation captured in pictures. "You know," Margaret said to Emily, "when I was on that street, abandoned and hopeless, I asked God to give me a reason to keep living. And did he answer? Yes, he did. He sent you." He. The two hugged tightly as the whole party sang Happy Birthday to Margaret. That night, when the celebration ended and everyone had left, Emily and Margaret stayed behind at the center, cleaning and organizing the space. "Emily, can I ask you for something?" Margaret said. "Of course, anything. When I leave this world, I want you to carry on this work. Promise me there will always be a place like this for abandoned seniors to find family." "Mrs. Margaret, don't talk like that. You still have many years ahead." "Emily, I'm 80 and have lived a full life. I'm not afraid of passing. I just want to be sure my legacy will continue." "I promise, Mrs. Margaret, this center will always exist, and your story will always be told to inspire others." Margaret smiled, satisfied. "Then I can rest in peace. My life had purpose, and that's all anyone could wish for." Years later, Emily still remembers that conversation as a moment of deep wisdom and love. Margaret had found, in her final years, something many people search for their whole lives, a purpose greater than herself. The story of Margaret and Emily became known throughout the state, inspiring the creation of dozens of similar centers. The model they developed was studied by universities and replicated in other regions of the country. But for Emily, Margaret's greatest legacy wasn't the awards or recognition. It was the lesson that it's never too late to start over, that true family is built with love and dedication, and that our worst moments can become the stepping stones to our greatest triumphs. Today, Emily still runs the Margaret Johnson Community Center, always remembering the words of her dear Mrs. Margaret. "The love we give always comes back to us, multiplied by the love we receive in return." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story of resilience and family. Do you believe Margaret made the right decision in distancing herself from her children? And wasn't Emily amazing in how she repaid the kindness her family received? Leave your honest thoughts about what moved you most in this story. Don't forget to like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other stories that will touch your heart.